Hello, Challenger. Today we're going to discuss on how to get a job in a big tech such as Meta, Google, or Amazon. And today I am here with Eduardo Barbosa. He's a good friend of mine, and Eduardo Barbosa has more than 15 years of experience as a software engineer. Most of his career he worked with Java. He specialized in microservices, and now he works for Meta as a senior software engineer. So happy to have you here, Eduardo. How are you?
All good. All good. Want me to go for a quick intro? Like
Go ahead.
last
Yeah.
thoughts. So moved to Ireland for the last 7 years, which was a big impact, changing language, companies. In Brazil, I used to work for the same company for more than 8 years. So different culture, different challenges. We worked together in Equifax when I joined here, probably 1.5 years. Then I moved to Huawei, and I'm now Meta, 3.5 years. More specifically on the WhatsApp team, which has kind of a low presence in Dublin. The big office is actually in London. Nice to be here. Talk about interviewing process and big techs.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Eduardo. And as Eduardo said, we're going to be talking about how to pass in big tech interviews. I know this is a big challenge for many developers. The interview process, algorithms, system design, it's hard. So Eduardo is going to talk about his strategies and what actions he took to get a job in Meta. So there will be many questions, Eduardo. I know you're ready for that, but let's get started then.
Go ahead.
Okay. So my first question to you, Eduardo, is regarding interviews, because like I said, it's a big challenge for developers. So how should you get prepared for a big tech interview?
My interview was like 3.5 years, but we still keep the same format. And the funny thing is, all the major big techs follow the same process. They use the same process, which tells a lot about what they're actually carrying and what they're actually looking for. I'm gonna be bring a few perspectives, not only as I did the interview, but how I actually conduct some of those interviews as well.
Yeah.
Uh, but starting first things first, I think the first thing you need to look into it, and before even start studying, in my opinion, is to understand the process. How many interviews, when they happen, what you need to study on each step. And ballpark, there's kind of like three phases. So the first phase, it's more like a talk to the interviewer, to the recruiter. He's gonna tell you about the job, tell you about the team, or tell about the company. And it doesn't feel like just because usually the recruiter is working for the company, but recruiters in big tech are actually your biggest ally. So they're gonna bring you content, they're gonna explain the team, they're gonna even explain about the person who is interviewing you.
Hmm.
They want you to do good in the interviews. And they're not in a hurry to actually get the interview set up or to get the ball rolling. They want to make sure first you're prepared, and they give you a lot of content. They're gonna wait as long as you want to study. So I recommend first understanding the process, understanding how many rounds, what will be the interviews, when they're gonna be happening, when they're actually gonna happen, um, and getting resources. So you're gonna talk about a lot of things. He's gonna ask you about salary compensation as well, because he wants to understand if you're actually a good fit for the specific role he's looking. In big tech specifically, they're not like fixed to a specific seniority. So let's say he's looking for, in Meta specifically, we call IC, individual contributor, but it's a little bit different on Amazon and Microsoft. But the grading, the numbers are usually similar. So if he's looking for IC4, he's actually gonna be okay with an IC3 or IC5, depending how good you are in the interview, how long you are working in IT, all of that. So, first recommendation before jumping to study anything is understand the interview process because it matters a lot. It matters how you show how you're coding. Not only what you're coding, but you need to show what you're doing. But we can go in depth on each one of them a little bit later.
Perfect. And you mentioned about recruiters. So, what is a good way to find a good recruiter for big tech companies?
I don't think you need to worry about that too much because they usually are in house. So what you need to do is apply for the job inside their website. So rarely, I don't see any of the big techs they're actually hiring like an outside company or outside recruiters for the roles. They usually post on their website and they go through the whole process. They will not send third-party recruiters to trying to find resources. This is usually
Uh,
not what they do. What they might do is they hire interviewers to go through CVs and find the specific ones that they match what they're looking for. So then they start the process later. So I wouldn't say you need to find a special recruiter who works for MasterCard or works for different companies. Usually they don't work with third-party recruiters. So you don't need to worry about finding a recruiter. Just apply through the website and one recruiter specific on your time zone, on your city, will start the process.
awesome. So basically, the recruiters for the big techs are in the big techs. They are not external.
Exactly. Yes.
So
They
basically,
might be
just
contractors. They might be contractors, but they are contractors within Meta infrastructure or Google infrastructure.
awesome. And in your case, Eduardo, how was the interview process for Meta?
So it was really long, and this is one of the things that usually is a little bit frustrating, like for every engineer, because there might be different process in life. So you might want to move from one role to another, or you might want to change companies, and the process itself is very lengthy. I wouldn't say it's never less than 40 days,
Hmm.
and it could go beyond 3 months, depending on the company, depending on what you're actually looking for. So my process is specifically, I was doing contracting for Huawei, and my contract was due. So I started interviewing. I did interview with Workday. I did with MasterCard. I'm trying to remember the others, but I literally did like seven or eight different companies interview process at the same time. The
Mhm.
longest one was Meta by far. So even Workday, which took like a month, it was like 2 weeks quicker than Meta in the end. And the process is usually is because it was because of me. So I wanted to be prepared. So when I got to the first recruiter, he literally posted me a lot of documentation. And for the code interview, I recommend always going to Lead Code or HackerRank. So you need to actually go through some of those testing, small testing. There's different difficulties that you're going to look into it, but you need to start coding no matter what. You need to start doing some small tasks. Don't worry about if you don't get it right at first. This is not what they you should be looking to get 100%, but you need to familiarize with the questions. You need to familiarize with the coding itself. They're not that hard, to be fair. They're not meant to be hard. Just because the whole interview it's around 45 minutes, and usually you get two questions. So you need to code two questions without an IDE. So it's going to be like literally a whiteboard, and they're not meant to be complex. They're not meant to be lengthy. They're meant to trying to exercise a specific thing. For example, if you get a specific question is probably, let's say, stack. It's not going to be a complex coding exercise, but it's going to measure if you know how to use a stack or a list or a tree. So you're rarely going to get like one question that goes span over trees, stacks, list, and complex things. So it's always like one topic you want to understand do you know how to use a stack, or do you know how to explain how you are also using the stack? It's not like I know how to do it and this is how you do it, but it's a lot about explaining your thought process and coding.
Yeah, and that's something difficult, right? Because you have to write the algorithm, and then in the process you have to explain it. So how did you practice that? Like, did
That's
you
that's
did
hard.
you
That's
talk
hard.
to the rubber duck or something like that?
Not really. For me, it was more like I always had the idea of coding and thinking out loud, especially when you're blocked or you don't know what to go. It's really good to actually trying to explain the problem. The rubber duck. But I usually go to for person different people. I don't like talk to rubber duck. But that's true. Explaining the process will help you unblock or understand where you're not going right. I wouldn't like waste too many time on a specific problem that you're blocked. Just read the resolution, read the response, because you're gonna understand and you're gonna learn a lot about your mistakes as well. But going back to how my interview process was, so the first interview was talking to a recruiter, explaining my background, everything. Then he provided me a lot of content to study to get to the first interview. The first interview was like set up 2 weeks after because I wanted to go through the documentation. There was really good interviews that you could actually listen through YouTube, all of that. Then after the first interview is a code interview, 45 minutes, 2 questions, one engineer, and you're gonna go over on a whiteboard. So no IDs, no code completion, and you can choose your language. That's the tricky part as well. So you can actually choose the language you're gonna solve the problems. And funny thing is, I'm not familiar with Python, for example, but I do, and I conduct interviews in Python. So they know how to actually, that specific example or specific code, they know how to code it, or they know the language that is coding. And even if I'm not familiar with Python, I can see a code in Python and I can check resources to see if you're actually coding right. But I think it's very important for you to code in a language that you're familiar with. Even if Python is less code than Java, if you're familiar with Java, go for Java, code in Java. They're not going to pick you on very specific things, but they want to know if they want to see you coding fast. So you're going to have, again, 45 minutes for 2 questions. It needs to be high paced and you need to explain what you're doing through the code process.
So to practice those algorithms, we have to practice with text block without an IDE.
Yes, yes. And I'm pretty sure like Lead Code and Hack Rank, they provide you like a just a text sheet. So you can just type what your code is not going to be auto-completed. And I don't think they actually run your code as well. I think they're going to show you what is a running algorithm, a okay one, but they're not going to run your code and test it. So it's more like you typing and making sure then you check later the right answer if you actually did right.
Uh, and how many times can you run your algorithm? Do you have to run and do you have to make it
You don't
right in
run.
the
You
first
don't
run?
run. No, you don't run. You don't
You
run
don't
your
run.
own. No, we're gonna check your code. Me and you, for example, if I'm interviewing you, I'm gonna check your code and I know what needs to be done on the code exercise. Again, the exercise is
Oh,
not complex. They're not picking on you for specific like mistake
syntax.
code syntax exactly, but they want to know what they're looking, and I'm looking every time as well when I'm doing the interviews is first, can you explain what you're coding? Do you understand what you're doing? Because nowadays, and I did interviews like this, people using ChatGPT for coding, and
My God.
and ChatGPT will give you a right answer, but you don't know what they coded. So you don't know why each line was actually posted on a code block. So you need to explain to me what you're actually coding because you might know, or it might be like a question that you know by these interviews, or you can actually Google and find the actual solution. But I want you to explain to me step by step. The other thing really important that we look is I don't want you to jump in directly to code. I want you to read the questions, go through the questions that I'm asking, and I'm always gonna leave some information out. Always.
Uh,
And I want you to discover them. I want you to go over the questions and understand what is missing before you even start coding. So, for example, let's say I give you a list and I want you to sort. In my list specifically, I'm not going to put like the same number twice, but I want you to think about that edge case and ask about it. I
mm,
want you to take a look and say, okay, I understood this is a list. You want me to sort it. What if I have the two numbers, equal numbers in the list? What happens? What do you want me to do? And I say, it doesn't matter. If they are the same number, you can count in any order, both of them. So you can change the order. It's fine. But I want you to think about the edge case. Another question that you could do for me is, what if I have a new object? Right? So what do you want me to do? And then I'll probably gonna explain, hey, you know what? You can assume that the list has no new elements. Or I can go back and say, yeah, new is a possibility. You need to code through the nose. This is the important piece at the beginning of the questions. I want you to first go through the question, make sure you know what you need to do before starting coding, and ask questions. I want you to ask me questions about, because I'm always gonna leave some stuff behind, especially like important edge case.
yeah, and that's an important skill for software engineers, right? Because all of our tasks are basically ambiguous, and we need to know what we are doing so you can learn a lot about a candidate if they make the right questions or if they are curious to understand the problem. If they go right away to solve the problem with coding, it means that like they are solving something that they don't even know what's exactly the problem.
Yep, yep, exactly. So we
So
want to understand the problem first before jumping into code. We want to make sure that this is what we're going for, and then we start even in our mind explaining before even going to code.
and this could even be potentially could be a deal breaker, right? You could
Yes.
even reject candidates because of that.
Yes, because imagine one thing, I'm always going to leave something out on the question, right? So if you don't understand what is missing or the edge case that might be on this specific questions, might code it wrong. Or it might be the opposite. You might code everything and I give you an edge case that won't work on your code. So you're gonna waste more time refactoring, rebuilding your code to support that edge case that you didn't think through the beginning of the question. So this is a deal breaker for two reasons. First, if you don't get the edge case, it's not what I want. Also, if you get late, you might lose time just to refactor everything through the interview, right? This is really important. The other thing that is really important as well is after you code, because we are now running on an IDE, I want you to go through the inputs and show me what your code would be doing on a specific input case that we might agree on. So usually what I'll do is I want you to sort the list, and I'll give you two lists as an example. So this list will be sorted this way, this list will be sorted this way, before and after. And then I want you to code, get one example, and go through the loop, for example, to sort and show how this is what's going to happen. This is going to be switched on the first interaction, on the second one, because I want to understand that you actually know what you coded. You didn't make it right by mistake. I want you to actually show me how your algorithm is actually working. And again, the question won't be lengthy. It's not a lot code wise. I'll expect like, let's say 30 lines of code tops. It's not going to be a complex process. I won't be picking on your code because of you don't know how to, for example, you don't know a function, a predefined function to lowercase.
Mhm.
If you just put this is a lowercase function, I'm okay with it, right? but I want you to code the exercise as we want. For example, as well, sort this list. I don't want you to use string sort or C sort or whatever you predefined functions. I want you to actually go through the sorting algorithm. But
Mm.
if you need one function to check the lowercase, I'm okay with it. It's not the main core. It's not the main thing that I want you to code.
So is it common to give a sorting algorithm? Because that's something that I believe many developers don't remember. For example, how to code the merge sort or quick sort or
It's gonna be like
whatever the
I
other
want you to
algorithm.
do a merge sort. I'm not gonna get you and say, hey, I want you to do a merge sort. It's actually more complex. I want you to understand what is the merge sort doing. And one question that is really common is merge sort is actually two lists, right? You get, is it two lists? Yes. So
You
you
break
want
the
to
list in the middle, right?
like the list and then merge. So now
Yeah.
imagine that I want you to merge three lists. So this is one common problem. For example, I have three lists already ordered, and I want you to merge them and keep them in order. So
Mm.
it's going to be a mix of how to sort, how can you actually merge them. And one thing that is really important as well at the end is I want to know the complexity of what you build.
Big
Memory,
notation.
yes. So big O notation is a big question as well that we always make. So I want to understand you merge three lists and they're sorted. What is the big O for memory and for processing? And you might come up with a solution that is ON. And I say, you know what, there's a better way to do.
Mm.
Maybe you do ON square and I say, there's a better way to do. I can get on ON log n. Do you
Mm.
see a way to do it? Do you see a way to improve it? This is one thing that we might be able to do as well. And that's fine. That's actually really fine. So for example, you start your problem and you start your problem in a way that is not the best efficiency one.
The
Yes,
naive
yes.
solution.
Yeah. So you get your solution. It's not the best way to solve it. I'll actually ask questions to say, hey, can we improve this one? And we can go over. To be fair, you don't even need to get to the working solution. You always need to get a working solution, but if you don't get the best solution possible, you improve, you know how to improve, and you show me how to improve. I might not ask you to code it, and we go to the second interview, for example, to the second question. So this is fine as long as I know you know how to improve or what is missing to improve.
Okay. So in this case, you had two algorithms in 45 minutes.
Yes, it's always the code interview is always two algorithms, 45 minutes.
Oh.
I'm going to say always, but this is the majority of them. So some interviews, and I met them, sometimes they go for, you know what, I want one complex one. I'm going to bring one very complex to the interview, and that's fine. I'm not going to make it to. I don't like that approach because I want to test you as much as possible in 45 minutes. I don't want
Mhm.
you to get stuck in one task, in one problem, and I'm only gonna see, hey, do you know how to use a stack? A very complex stack. It doesn't matter. I want you to know, do you know what is a stack, how to use a stack in a very simple problem? And then I'll go for a tree. Do you know how to use a tree in a very simple way? I don't want you to spend too much time, 45 minutes just talking about a stack. It's not enough signals in the end.
Yeah. And the other point is that I know that some interviewers, they don't tell the candidate if there will be two algorithms or if there will be only one. So in your case, they told you if there would be only one algorithm or
No, they told there was going to be two algorithms. When I'm doing interviews, I'm go up front, explain the whole process.
very
Uh,
good.
I don't like to start with one and say it's two. I always explain before, and I'm pretty sure all the interviews they usually do. They usually go 5 minutes, present themselves. You present yourself. We go for two coding. I explain this is going to be two exercise and I want to see what your thoughts are. Please let me know your thought process.
Amazing. So the thought process is really the important thing, right? So basically,
Yes.
you want to know if the candidate knows about the data structure, and you want to know if the candidate knows how to explain that clearly as well. Communication skills is very important as well, right?
Yep. Yes. Yes. This is one of, for me, it depends. Each interview looks for different signals. I look for signals very clear on communication. On, do you know what you're doing? Do you know how to explain what you're doing? And to be fair, if I see language barriers, it's not a problem. We can
Mm,
talk as long as you explain what you're doing, and we can do that in different ways, right? So you
mm,
can explain a loop in completely different ways. Even if you
yeah.
don't know the right words, hey, I'm going for this loop. This is moment one, two, three. You can draw, you can do whatever you need to.
hmm Yeah. So would that be a deal breaker if the person can't communicate very clearly?
So this is actually a really good question. So that depends on the round of the interview. So remember when I said that the first round of interview is one coding exercise? So that one, we're trying to reduce the funnel. We're trying to remove people that doesn't know anything. So if you don't get to a second exercise 100%, I will bring you to the second round. So one question is right. The second question, we didn't have enough time, or you got almost right. You got like 90%, 80%. Good. You don't need to actually be perfect on the coding exercise on the first round. Then we go to the second round, which are 5 interviews, which will
Mhm.
be 3 behavior, 1 system design, and another code interview on the same format.
Oh, there'll be another coding interview.
Yes, yes. So
Uh,
let's go back and explain again everything from beginning. So you talk to the
yeah,
interview, he's going to schedule your first interview. Your first
yeah.
interview is just code. It's a code exercise. Then if you pass this code interview, which usually the bar is a little bit lower, you go to the second interview that might be in person or might be just 5 interviews. 3 behavior, which I don't do behavior interviews, and 2 technical, which is system design and another code interview. Exactly the same as the first one. So it's going to be exactly the same, 2 different questions. I'm not the engineer. It's not going to be ever the same engineer doing the 2 code interviews.
Oh, so is it going to be a more difficult question or exactly the
It
same
will be
difficulty?
same level, but it will be another engineer.
Oh, okay, so that you can compare different point of views and then you can
Yes.
discuss. Okay.
The funny thing is, the first code interview is not taken into consideration on the hiring process, only the second one. So the first one is just to remove you if you don't know anything. We don't take that
Oh,
one into the thought process on the second one. So what happens on the second one? It's a panel between all 5 interviewers, behavior and technical. So we're gonna grade and we're gonna say, he, I'll pass him, completely sure. I'll pass him, not 100% sure. I don't know. I don't have enough signals, or I don't pass, and I'm pretty sure I'm pretty sure about it. I don't pass. I'm not 100% sure. So then we're gonna get all 5 into a room and decide if we're gonna move to the hiring process or not. If we're gonna give an offer or not. We might actually ask you back again. We might actually say, hey, you know what? I don't have enough signals on the code interview. I want a new one. I can actually bring you back for one more round if I need to.
oh. So if everyone is unsure
No, it
about the
doesn't need to
answer,
be everyone, but if one person is not sure and he wants to
oh,
follow up, he can actually request a follow up. Or he might
nice.
just say, yeah, I don't want it. And we disqualify the candidate. But we only check for the last 5 interviews. So the first one, we don't take that into consideration, because usually what happens is it's someone outside the team doing the code interview. Then On the 5-1 is usually someone, all 5 are from the team or close teams or similar team or same org. And that's the one that we bring everyone into a room to decide, hey, is this guy give us enough signal about a hire or not?
So, and what is the bar to pass in the first interview? You mentioned that like the person has to know nothing to not pass in the interview. So how?
No, we have a pretty high standard. They
Okay,
usually have
okay,
a pretty high standard. So your exercise, your two coding needs to work. I need
yeah.
to see that it's going to work. It's doing what it's supposed to be doing. The other thing, we need to see really clear signals that you know what you're coding. So here's the problem. If you don't think out loud of your solution, but you get it right, you might pass. Make sense? So you code it, it's working. I don't have enough signals to see you know what you did or how you did it, but it might be okay for phase 1, right?
Oh,
The second one, I want to be sure that I knew what you were doing and you knew how to explain. So it's not only about knowing how to code, but explain what you're doing as well.
so and the other detail is that your code has to work, right?
It has
Because,
to
for
work.
example,
It has to
if
work.
I don't remember a syntax, if I don't remember like the substring or whatever syntax for to do
No,
anything in
that
the
will
code.
be okay. That will be okay. The problem is, let's say that I ask you to merge two lists, you create the code, but in the end it's not merging, or you're losing one item on it, or you're not thinking about it correctly. You did the code, but I know your code won't give me the result I want. This is a fail.
Oh, okay, because but you need to run the code and the output has to be
No,
correct,
not
or
really.
not?
That's what I'm saying. That the code itself does not need to be 100%, and it's not a big code as well. It's not going to be like 300 lines of code. It's going to be like literally 30 to 40 lines of code. So it's going to be uh, um, just a testing algorithm that we can do by visually seeing the code.
Oh, okay. So when you say the code has to work, the logic has to work.
Logic has to work. Exactly.
You don't
Yes.
need exactly to compile and run the code and have
Yes.
to have the output.
Yes. Yes. You're right.
Oh, okay. Just clarify that. Okay, it's clear. So what about the tree behavior interviews? How that works exactly?
So they're usually looking for critical thinking. They're gonna ask you about previous working environments. They're gonna ask about your company's how you handle conflict. This is very important as well. They take that very seriously. So they want to know, for example, and they actually look for real scenarios. For example, one question that might be common is, Rafael, did you had a conflict in a company in your past? Can you elaborate on one conflict that you had with another engineer? And then you're gonna, hey, I had a problem with one engineer who we were coding. I didn't like his standards, so I didn't approve his PR. That's common. And then I'm gonna follow up asking, okay, so how did you solve that conflict? How did you get to an agreement? Oh, we talked to a manager. The manager said he needs to improve his skill, and we move on. How do you feel about that? And what happened if the manager didn't agree with you? How do you feel? But what would be another solution? So it's always looking for ways to manage conflicts as well. Like managing conflict, how do you communicate with superiors, to peers, all of that.
Perfect. So all of those three interviews will be focused in conflicts, how to handle
No, some
conflicts.
is conflict. One is conflict. I don't remember exactly what they look for, and depends on the role as well. But they're usually looking for, one is behavior conflicts, the other one is looking for critical thinking.
Critical
Ex-
thinking, that's a good one. So
yeah,
how do you
it's very hard
develop
to.
how
Yes,
do
it's
you
very
develop
hard.
critical thinking?
Yes, But what you're trying to do is, what they actually want is for you to give an example in your career that you solve a project, or how did you handle a project from end to end. So can you explain me one project that you deliver end to end? And then you're going to choose one real example. So, oh, I coded um, a specific app for a customer. He wanted something very simple, but I built from end to end. Okay. So did you need to talk to other engineers, or did you build by yourself? Oh no, I needed another engineer to help me with the UI. Nice. Okay, so then you're gonna go through examples step by step. And what is very important is we will know, and it's very common to know if you actually did that project or not. You're gonna know specific details about it. You're gonna go through the examples, and we want to see how you how did you work other, we call XFNs, other collaborative persons that we're gonna work normally. This is like normal day-to-day work, right?
Yeah,
So you talk to a quality agent, you talk to a TPM, to a technical manager, you get the requirements. How did you get the requirements? And they're gonna try to understand if you agree with them. If you don't, how did you handle? What was the final expectation? All of that. So they're always gonna look for real time examples, like what happened with your previous job or a previous project. And it's really good to always have some projects in mind that you were successful, projects that you had some conflicts, and how you manage them.
so and what happens if the developer didn't develop a project from the beginning to the end?
So it doesn't need to be from the beginning and the end, but they're gonna
Okay,
try to find a project that you work on. Like
okay,
like a full app, but they want to understand, hey, can you explain me one project that you worked that was successful? And also, can you explain me a project that wasn't that successful and why?
ah,
This is common. Like how you handle conflict, how you handle problems, how you handle risks. This is what they're looking for. But this depends a lot of the seniority. So I'm gonna be more picky if you're senior level than if you're junior level, right? I'm gonna look for simpler examples if you're junior because you never actually had experience.
makes sense. And do you have a recommendation to study critical thinking?
Yes. So
Very good.
this is the fun thing because this is the part that lacks resource for engineers. So it's really easy for you to test all the challenges you want online, and you can go and try coding. You can test all of them. You can see the results. But now on the critical thinking, it's more subjective, right? But what I recommend is try yourself write down projects that you worked in the past that you want to show, kind of a portfolio. But I want you just to write and explain through the process, right? So if you worked on a project that was a new app, I want you to understand who were the customer, who asked you, did you had other engineers in your team, other POCs in the team that could actually help on requirements, for example? Did you gather the requirements? And I want to be very clear, like, no, I did not get the requirements. The requirements were done by another team. We just started at that process. Okay, when you got the requirements, did you disagree with any of them? No, the requirements were really good. We focus on execution, X, Y, and Z. But I want you to go through a real process to a real moment that happened in previous jobs and write it down. This will help you fit what the interviewer is asking into real examples.
Perfect. So they will focus on conflict handling. They will focus on critical thinking, how you handle project situation, how do you communicate with the team, how do you solve a complex problem. And the third one is about what exactly?
Good question. I don't remember exactly. If I remember, I'm pretty sure they do like two about projects. It's still looking
Yeah.
for different people asking the same thing. The third one might be very different if you're looking for a manager role as well. So they're actually looking for, they're going to go in depth into projects and conflict handling again. What is really common is one of those is going to be from your manager or from your direct reportee. So they're actually going to come and ask the same questions about critical thinking, about conflict handling, but more specific to their situation. They're going to bring is it's very common for them to bring the problem that you're working or the team that you might be working with. With that being said, there's a second situation that is very common. You might be doing interviews without a team in direct in mind. So you might just be doing like a blank interview. And after you pass all 5, you choose the team you want to join. This is common as well in big techs. So you're not actually joining a specific team, but you're being hired to a pool, and then you decide what team you want to join.
Amazing to have this option.
Also, after you join, you can actually change teams. You can actually, if there's a team with an open role, you just it's not an even application. You're just going to talk to the specific manager, or you can change teams. You can actually, if you are the one making the change, it needs to be once in a year. So you need to stay at least a year in the same role, in the same team. But if the team for some reason gets deprioritized, you can actually choose a new team without that rule. So let's say I move to a new team on WhatsApp that is doing maybe a new project in the app. 6 months later, they decide, you know what, we're going to give up on this feature. We're going to be, this team is going to be repurposed. Then you can actually join another team if you want to, just because your team was completely disassembled.
Awesome. That's really good. That's a really good flexibility the big techs give. Because in many companies, I know it's difficult, extremely difficult to change teams if you want to.
Yeah, this is one thing they do really good is they set a high bar, so you don't have to worry about moving teams. So the new team will not be, well, you know what, I want to understand if this guy's good enough or not. So if he's on that seniority level, he's gonna be able to move the teams fairly easy.
Amazing. And maybe it's the hardest interview, system design. So
Yes.
how is it?
That's a complicated one. I think it's the hardest one because it's not like 1 + 1 is 2. It's very subjective as well. I usually do more system designs than code interviews, just because my team, all the other engineers like to do code interviews. And code interviews usually are simpler for the interviewer as well. So I'm gonna go ask you a question, and I'm gonna say if you're okay or not. I'm gonna put your strengths, put what you did wrong, and move on. On the system design is a more complex. Usually, what we go is we start building a very fairly like open system. I'm gonna give some constraints, and we're gonna try to build together. It's more collaborativity. I'm gonna help you, you're gonna help me, but you're gonna drive the solution. Let's say, for example, which is very common, let's build, I don't know, Spotify from zero. We can literally say, okay, let's design Spotify. Or the other one that I saw really good is let's design a CI/CD pipeline, a CI/CD system from zero. I'm going to build a new one. And this again, I want you to explore the requirements. So I'm going to start with a blanket option. Let's build a CI/CD. Then I want first you to start with the requirements, functional and non-functional. So I want to understand how many pipelines we have. I'll say, okay, we're planning for 100,000 pipelines. So how many builds we're expecting per day? We're expecting at least 50,000 builds. And then we want to see if you work at scale. This is actually the major requirement. I want you to show me that you know how to work scaling solutions. It doesn't matter how, but we're going to focus on all of them. So I want you to explain me cache, distribution, load balancing, queues, and I want you to use them. And I'm saying I want you to use them, but I want you to use them in the right way. And this is the problem. You might know what is a queue, you might know what is a cache, but can you use it properly into the solution? So you're not going to code, but I want you to go on building blocks. I want you to start drafting something. And there's actually, depending on the company, they have their own solution to work. We use a Excalidraw to draw diagrams and for the interview.
I love this tool. It's amazing.
Yeah. It's good for everything. You can use on even on PRs. It's really good, especially on a very complex PR. You want to explain why you're building that or the building blocks. Just draft really quick on Draw, take a screenshot and post it. So that's usually what we're looking for. And within the interview, I want again, same thing. I want you to think out loud. I want you to explain what you're building, your solution. But on this situation, it's very subjective, right? So I want you to start making some calculations, but also it needs to be in line from what I'm actually expecting. For example, I asked like 50,000 builds per day. How are you going to put a computer to do that? So you need now to start thinking about a fleet of computers doing the builds. But how are they going to negotiate which build, which one of them is going to be building? So you could do that in different ways, right? So you could be building maybe a queue mechanism or maybe an assignment mechanism that, hey, here's a list. Let's try delivering them. But if you decide to use for a queue, I want you to explain me how a queue works. I want to understand, okay, so how the queue actually works for scaling. I want to see if you understand the concept of partitions or how do you use a key to do that, to scale that properly. But usually it's up to the interviewee to actually go and design, and then I'm going to try to go in depth in one of those technologies. So if you decide for a queue and I see that you're knowledgeable about the queue, I'm going to go in depth in the queue and I'm going to start making the hard questions.
Interesting. So, for example, if the interviewee is talking about Kafka, you're going to ask the interviewee to go deep into the concepts of Kafka.
Yes. It doesn't need to be Kafka, but if you're going for Kafka or for cache, if I understand that you're more knowledgeable about the cache, then I'll go deep in cache.
Okay, but are you going deep into the concept of cache or in the
I'm going to go
technology?
deep into the concept of cache while you're applying. So, for example, let's say you build a website. The solution is we're building a UI, you put a load balancer, and then, okay, the load balancer solves one problem, but now it's still bounded by one database, right? And then you say, I'm going to put a cache here because I want to make sure that I can still use this database. All the reads go through the cache first. And then I go back. I'm going to start making sure the cache will work as expected. For example, if we're putting a cache, but every user asks a completely different entity, the cache will always miss, right? So I want to make sure that you know how you're actually putting the cache into the solution and the cache will work, right? You need to hit more than actually miss on a cache to make sense. Otherwise, you're just putting a new system that is probably going to make it worse. You're going to add latency, and in the end, you're going to make all the calls to the database again, right? So it needs to be a system that the same entity is called multiple times. Then it makes sense to put a cache. Otherwise, we need a reader replica. So if you're putting a cache in the wrong place, I'm going to try to understand why or how you can actually fix. And it's fine to make a miss. I'm going to put a cache here and then I go back, but it won't work because every time it's a new user requesting a completely different information. And, oh, you're right, I need a read replica. So he puts a read replica. But as soon as I understand that his knowledge on that problem is a little bit higher, I'm going to do a deep dive on it. It could be on the read replica now. So how you have a read replica. So how the read replica works. How can you make sure that we're actually reading from the right place? So you might need to understand where the reads are coming, where the writes are coming, because if the writes are too high, a read replica will not solve the problem as well.
Perfect. So you would go deep into any component of the system. Like you could go deep into load balancer or read replicas or message brokers or any other
Hash,
component you think it's
or
interesting for hash.
yep, yep. Depending on the situation, depending on if I know or understand the knowledge about it on his mind is fresher as well. Because I want him to actually show me that he knows something. He knows how he's using, he knows what might be the pitfalls on the solution and how to solve as well.
So basically also to talk about the trade-offs.
Yes, yes. We want the trade-offs because there's no right way of building one system specifically, especially because we are open to any type of solution. But I want to make sure that you know how to work on. For example, whenever you're building a system, a scalable system, and you start building, I'm gonna ask what type of database you're thinking about. Oh, I'm thinking about a MySQL. Nice, it will work. But as soon as I start scaling, I need you to show me how you're gonna scale this MySQL, right? So if it's a NoSQL, it's simpler because you just spawn new instances. But if you're on a MySQL solution, now how are you gonna scale this one? Maybe you're gonna shard the whole system, but I want you to explain, okay, so if you're sharding the system, what are you gonna be using as a key?
Perfect. And the other crucial thing in this design interview is to make questions, right? It's to make questions and to assume that it's going to be simple because it's only 45 minutes interview, right?
Yes. It's not about being simple. On this one, I think it's more complex, but I don't want you to waste time on small things. I want to see your knowledge throughout the solution. I don't want you to code the solution. So let's say we're building Spotify. I don't want you to show me the UI or build a UI. I want you to put a building block. This is the UI. Now, how you're going to scale this UI for 100 million people? Oh, now I need a load balancer. Okay, but this information needs to come from somewhere. Oh, this is going to come from a database. Okay, what type of database? So we need to be fluid on the conversation. We need to find solutions that work as well. So it's not that complex, like in the amount of work, but I want to see a working or possible working solution.
Yeah, and that's a tricky one, right? It's difficult. How would you practice for system design interview? Because I know that many developers don't have the experience of designing a system in their companies. Even more if they are working for big tech for financial companies, right?
Yes.
The company is so big that how can you create a new project? This is difficult. You usually won't create a new project or new system design. So I know that the vast majority of software developers don't have this experience, this specific experience with system design. So how to practice this skill to pass in the interview?
That's a good question, but I would go first. I would watch. There's a lot of good content on YouTube on system design interviews, like a mock interview. This is very common on YouTube for you to actually watch. I recommend first watching mock interviews, so you see what the kind of questions they're making, what is a functional or non-functional, and then go into the concepts. I think you need to understand the basic concepts of queues, database, load balancers, key, hashing, and there's
Sharding,
other concepts that we might have. Sorry?
sharding,
Sharding,
read
yes.
replicas.
Read replicas, all of that, yes. You need to understand a little bit on the NoSQL as well, limitations, because you might just say, hey, I'm going to put a NoSQL. Okay, but how are you going to match now orders with products and get a balance? So then you need to start thinking about that as well. So sometimes your solution needs to be a SQL database. It's going to be easier to design.
Yeah, there's the CAP theorem as well.
Yeah.
It's very useful to study. So would you recommend developers to practice with their friends, for example? Like they
Yes,
go in
yes.
a call and then they do interviews, mock interviews.
But I would start first watching them before even doing the mock-up. First watch them, understand what type of concept. Then what you might need to understand is I don't know anything about caching. So you can read a little bit, understand a little bit of cache. You don't need to be like deeper into it. But again, one of those technologies, we're gonna do a deep dive. So you need to be comfortable with one of them and how to use them.
Oh, okay. And so what about if the developer has, if they talk about cache and load balancer, but then you say, hey, talk about cache. Then the developer say, I don't know much about cache. Can we talk
Yeah,
about
no,
load balancer?
that's completely fine. That's completely fine. As long as what they propose will work. So if you put a cache
Okay,
in a system that will now not work at all, you don't know the basic of the cache, right? You're just putting the cache over there because you think it's gonna solve. You don't need to go deep into the cache, but it needs to work. If you're putting a cache in a part of the solution, it needs to work. It needs to be plausible.
perfect. And when doing this design interview, you have to assume, right? You can't say, oh, how is this thing? You have to assume the things
No,
the
that's the
way.
thing. That's the part that you're gonna ask for the requirements. You're gonna ask for my help as an interviewer. What do you want? What do you mean? I'll be kind of a product owner, a system design, and a consumer at the same time. So, for example, you're gonna the CI/CD example again. So we're gonna create a CI/CD example. It's up to you to ask me how many builds we're expecting. 50,000. But let's start with 50,000. Then you want, okay, so what's the language? Can I use Git as a source control for my CI/CD? So those
Okay.
are the kind of questions that you should be asking, and then you're gonna start designing the solution.
So it doesn't matter if I, instead of asking you the number of builds, like if I assume, like I say, hey, Eduardo, I assume we're going to have, I don't know, 40,000 builds.
No, you need
You,
to ask.
you
I'm the
it's
one
okay.
defining the requirements. I'm asking. You need to ask the requirements for me, and I'll be given.
Yeah, because I saw that in many system design interview videos, and they say that you can't ask, you have to assume things. Have to always assume and say, hey, we need this number of users
No,
or whatever.
you need to assume or calculate based on my requirements. For example, right? So I'm giving you 50,000 builds a day. Now, what you need to assume is one machine, how many builds per hour can it process, right? This type of thing you can assume. Or you're gonna try to assume. So you're gonna ask me, hey, I'm thinking about one machine can handle 50 builds per hour. And I say, yeah, sounds plausible. Go ahead. But I want you to do the calculation now. Okay, so 50 builds per hour, 24 hours. I'm assuming that build is working, that machine is working. Then divided by 50,000, how many machines I need per day, right? And then you make the calculation, you get to, I don't know, 100 machines building. My next question will be, what happens if we have a peak, right? Now, you might ask me back, okay, if we have a peak, is it okay for a developer to wait for 30 minutes for the build? What are these are the non-functional requirements for how long I want to wait in a queue. What is a plausible wait? Oh no, I'm expecting 1 minute, but in high load, I'm okay with 10 minutes, right? So on a peak, this might be a problem. So how you solve a peak? Oh, we can start up new machines based on demand. So based on the size of the queue, let's start new machines and then destroy them after the demand goes lower. But I want you to understand the concept of an auto-scaling model. I don't want you to build the auto-scaling model, but I want you to provide as a solution an auto-scaling model. But if you're providing an auto-scaling module, you don't need to go that deep. But I want to understand, okay, so what will trigger the scale up? The size of the queue. Okay, what will trigger the scale down? I can still use the size of the cube, right? So the assumptions that you're making, it's more to help on calculation, to help design the solution, but it needs to be reasonable. And it doesn't hurt for asking for help. Like, hey, do you think one machine can run 50 builds? Yeah, sounds plausible. Let's use that number. I don't want you to assume that 1,000 machines will handle the load, right? I want you to see you making the calculations about it. Make sense?
Perfect. Makes sense. Yeah. Thank you so much. That's really good information for any developer who wants to join a big tech company. Amazing, Eduardo. So a lot of good information about the interview process. So you went through the algorithms question, how to get prepared. You talked about the 3 behavior interviews, which we should focus on how to handle conflicts, critical thinking. Also, we would have a conversation with the manager. So it's a conversation where you see if your thoughts match with the manager, if the manager likes you. And the other interview you went through was the system design. And you mentioned that for Meta and probably, I think, all of the big techs, they want you to create scalable systems. So you're going to be focusing a lot on that, on components that make your system scalable. And when you talk about specific component, you have to know how that works exactly and explain the concepts, how this component will scale the system. And the last interview is the algorithms interview. But in this interview, like I said, it's more detailed because the interviewer wants to make sure that when you are coding, you need to know exactly what you're doing. So you need to explain correctly the data structure, and you need to obviously code it correctly. Doesn't need to be 100% syntax correct, but you need to have the logic correct, and you need to explain the concept, big O notation, time complexity, space complexity. Super important.
Testing is very important. A lot of the times they want you to see you testing mentally the code.
Oh.
So this is easy with the input and output. So you're mentally explaining the testing. So I'm going to put like this to list on the first interaction. It's going to be the first one, then the second, then the third. So he wants to see you like mentally testing. This is not like a big deal, but it's really good to see as well.
Amazing. So my last question to you then, Eduardo, is what's the golden tip you leave to developers who want to pass in big techs?
So prepare. I think everybody needs to be prepared. So you need to study. Even if you are like 15 years working as a developer, sometimes a fresh graduate gets faster just because it is faster in their mind, those basic structures, basic algorithms. But it's very important for you to test it, go to lead code, do some interviews, read a lot about it, and prepare. So like don't be cocky in the sense that I know what I'm doing. I code for 12 years in my company. I'm gonna do well. The interview process is completely different. It's similar to like car license. So you might know how to drive, but it's a very specific process that you need to go through to show that you know how to do it. So I recommend testing, reading, doing mock interviews, and be prepared. This is what it's going to be the golden tip.
Amazing. Thank you so much, Eduardo, for sharing with us this valuable knowledge and sharing your time with us. And I'm pretty sure that you Challenger, you liked this content because it's really, Eduardo showed here the steps, the way for you to want to pass on a big tech interview. That's the way. So thank you so much, Eduardo, and I hope to see you again here.
Thank you for the opportunity. Thanks for everyone.
Want to say anything to the audience?
Just good interviews.
Take action, do interviews. Very good. Awesome. Thank you so much. Cheers.